This is a very emotionally intense segment here, so be forewarned. But in October of last year, Dr. Feroz Sidwa, a trauma surgeon, printed the following guest essay in the New York Times: 65 doctors, nurses, and paramedics, what we saw in Gaza. So this was a pretty thorough report combined with X-ray images of bullets in children's brains and skulls, that was co-signed by, like the title says here, 65 doctors and nurses. He got testimonials from all of these people testifying to the horrors that they witnessed during their time in Gaza. And yesterday, he testified at the United Nations. The whole speech is about 9 minutes. We're going to play about 3 minutes or 3 or 4 minutes of it right now. But this is truly harrowing and very, very emotionally disturbing stuff here.
Gaza, I operated in hospitals without sterility, electricity, or anesthetics. Surgeries took place on crowded and filthy floors. Children died not because their injuries were unsurvivable, but because we lacked blood, antibiotics, and the most basic supplies that are readily available in any large hospital anywhere else in the world. I did not see or treat a single combatant during my 5 weeks in Gaza. My patients were 6-year-olds with shrapnels in their heart and bullets in their brains, and pregnant women whose pelvises had been obliterated and their fetuses cut in two while still in the womb. Mothers sheltering in the hospital cooked bread on hot plates in the emergency department during mass casualty events, as we dealt with the rain of fire and death falling around us everywhere. Mr. President, the foundations of life in Gaza, family, health, and community, have been shattered. The medical system has not failed. It has been systematically dismantled through a sustained military campaign that has willfully violated international humanitarian law. Civilians are now dying not just from the constant airstrikes, but from acute malnutrition, sepsis, exposure, and despair. Between my 2 visits to Gaza, I witnessed a sharp decline in patients' health, driven not just by injury, but by worsening hunger and malnutrition that left their bodies weaker, their wounds slower to heal, and their survival far less certain. And let's not forget, this is a man-made catastrophe. It is entirely preventable. Participating in it or not, allowing it to happen is a choice. This is a deliberate denial of conditions necessary for life: food, shelter, water, and medicine. Preventing genocide means refusing to normalize these atrocities. It means refusing to dehumanize the Palestinians, to refuse to see them as calories counted or numbers of trucks moved. We see now that this way of thinking has brought about a human dignity crisis, with an entire people on the edge of survival. On March 18th, the ceasefire was violated by Israel. That day, I witnessed the most extreme mass casualty event of my career at Nasser Medical Complex. 221 trauma patients arrived in one morning. 90 were dead on arrival. Nearly half were severely injured children. No health system on earth could cope with this, least of all one that is besieged and starved of supplies. Hospitals are meant to be sanctuaries. Healthcare workers and first responders are supposed to be protected. Children are supposed to be protected. In Gaza, these protections are simply gone. Every day, the distinction between combatant and civilian is erased. Most of my patients were preteen children, their bodies shattered by explosives and torn by flying metal. Many died. Those who lived often awoke to find their entire families gone. Last year, I published in the New York Times a survey of 65 American healthcare workers who had served in Gaza. 83% of them reported seeing children shot in the head or the chest. I personally treated 13 such cases in my 2 weeks at European Hospital. According to the War Child Alliance, nearly half of Gaza's children are suicidal. They ask, why didn't I die with my sister, my mother, my father?
I have to play that again.
War Child Alliance, nearly half of Gaza's children are suicidal. They ask, why didn't I die with my sister, my mother, my father? Not out of extremism, but out of unbearable grief. I wonder if any member of this council has ever met a 5-year-old child who no longer wants to live. let alone imagined a society in which so many young children feel this way. And what astonishes me is not that some children in Gaza have lost the will to live, but that any still cling to hope.
So that is 4 minutes of about a 9-minute speech, and it's brutal to take. I encourage you to share the entire thing. Dropsite has it. I should have retweeted it and pinned it before the show. I forgot to. I will. So if you go to our X later on in the day, it'll be pinned there, and you could share that because, as some of you were saying in the chat, yeah, that's not going to make the mainstream news. No way. No way. I hope some of it does. Feroz has made the rounds on media, both legacy media and alternative media. We were going to interview him. He just got called into surgery the day of the interview, and we were never able to put it back together because he's obviously extremely busy. We have his contact. I would love to get him on sometime when he can make it. But he has been making the rounds, incredibly poised, incredibly calm, and the scene at the Security Council meeting was, of course, extremely tense and somber. Here is the representative from the state of Palestine, recognized, of course, by the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, breaking down while in the same room.
Unbearable. How could anyone tolerate? Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March, over 1,300 Palestinian children have been killed, and around 4,000 have been injured. These are children. Children. And still, a war against barbarism. Children. Dozens of children are dying of starvation. The images of mothers embracing their motionless bodies, caressing their hair, talking to them, apologizing to them. It's unbearable. How could anyone tolerate this horror? Excuse me, Mr. President. I have grandchildren. I know what they mean to their families. And to see the situation of the Palestinians without us having hearts to do something is beyond the ability of any normal human being to tolerate. Flames and hunger are devouring Palestinian children.
Well, he's right. It is beyond the ability of normal people to tolerate, which is what explains, obviously, the shift in opinion that has been clearly evident this past week or so. But here is Feroz Sidwa on the BBC responding to that very clip. And as that clip cuts out, you could see the BBC anchor holding back tears, which once again is, I think, an indication of why we have passed a tipping point, because as the ambassador there says, no normal person can stomach this. It is not normal to look at scenes like that, to hear testimony like that and not be rattled. It's not normal to not be rattled when you hear something like that. So let's take a look at this.
This horror.
Well, also present at that UN Security Council meeting giving testimony was Dr. Feroz Sidwa. He's a trauma surgeon who has volunteered in Gaza, and he joins me now. Thanks for being with us here on BBC News.
You notice, look when it cuts out. See, she's obviously choked up there.
Well, also present at that UN Security Council meeting giving testimony was Dr. Feroz Sidwa. He's a trauma surgeon who has volunteered in Gaza, and he joins me now. Thanks for being with us here on BBC News.
Okay, so now he talks a little bit about the aid situation, which we'll get into a little bit. I covered this more thoroughly on Jimmy's yesterday, and I'll link to that when we clip this, but we will get into it a bit now.
As I said, you were at the Security Council hearing this morning. You've been in Gaza. When we look at those scenes of desperate people overcoming what little aid is starting to come into Gaza, can you describe to us just what the situation is like there now?
Yeah, the situation is horrendous. It's certainly the worst it's ever been. There is widespread and very severe hunger in Gaza. Most of the hospitals are non-functional. Most of the other types of healthcare checkpoints or service points are non-functional. It's horrific. It's hard to describe in a few words, honestly.
And in terms of the health situation that is there, you said there most of the hospitals aren't functioning. So what is the situation for children specifically?
It's devastating. Children are half of Gaza's population. The median age is 18. And when I was there, about half of my patients were small children. I'm talking about pre-teenage children now. The situation is terrible. Children do not function well, and they certainly can't grow and develop normally when they're being starved. One small piece of bread to eat per day is not enough for a child to live, let alone thrive. And then when children get injured, they have very little access to health care, certainly not to meaningful reconstructive health care. Like, I'm a trauma surgeon. I can stop people from bleeding to death with minimal equipment, but reconstructing their limbs, fixing their spines, dealing with traumatic brain injuries, these are all things that are just not available in the Gaza Strip in any meaningful sense anymore. And then the psychiatric devastation that children are facing is absolutely unprecedented, I suspect, in all of world history. The War Child Alliance, and I mentioned this during the Security Council meeting, the War Child Alliance has put out a report showing that almost half of Gaza's children are suicidal. That's completely I've never seen anything like that in any of the conflict zones I've ever worked in. I think it was 96% of Gaza's children expect to die in this war.
96% expect to die.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
Yeah. So the UN condemns the U.S. aid system in Gaza after Israel opens fire on crowds. So there's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a sort of privately funded U.S. and Israeli-approved aid delivery entity that has commandeered the quote-unquote aid operation in Gaza. And this is the image that went viral a couple of days ago. This is the line for food, looking very much like a concentration camp in Rafah. Now, they set up these aid distribution centers in the south because they want to lure the population to the south and lock them in the south and then build housing for them in the south. In other words, a concentration camp, because they want to clear out and claim the north. So they're saying if you want food, you have to walk 10, 12 miles south to get food if you're in the north, and then get online. Most of these people did not end up getting any food, but there were shots fired and injuries reported at these scenes. A U.S. and Israeli-backed process for distributing aid in the Gaza Strip faced growing criticism Wednesday after scores of Palestinians were wounded across 2 days of deliveries. Fearful, desperate crowds thronged locations where food was being handed out, underscoring the scale of the hunger crisis in the besieged and shattered enclave. UN officials said that as many as 50 people appeared to have been shot and injured near the private aid distribution site in the southern city of Rafah's Tel al-Sultan neighborhood Sunday, and that crowds had overrun Tuesday, sorry about that, and that crowds had overrun a World Food Program distribution site near Deir al-Balah in central Gaza on Wednesday, sacking it for individual bags of flour before themselves being attacked by armed looters. Initial reports indicate 2 people died and several were injured in the tragic accident, World Food Program said in a statement. A health official at the nearby Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, Ayad Amawi, said later that 3 people had been killed. Humanitarian needs have spiraled out of control after 80 days of complete blockade of all food assistance and other aid into Gaza, WFP said. Israel has barred nearly all food and medical supplies from entering Gaza since March 2nd. Since March 2nd, we're now almost in June, leaving parts of the population on the brink of starvation. The newly launched aid program is run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a controversial private organization that began distributing food in Gaza this week. The mechanism is Israeli approved, secured by private contractors backed by the United States, and bypasses the UN system for providing relief. Like I said, we did a more thorough piece on this on the Jimmy Dore show yesterday, which you can watch. That should be coming out today. But of course, why would the United States and Israel want to control the aid distribution? Why? Because they want to distribute aid on their terms. Number one,
Right.
they want the aid to be distributed in the South, since that's where they want all the people. They don't want the UN coming and giving it out in the North. That does not accomplish their goal. Norm Finkelstein, in the conversation he had with Benny Johnson on the Piers Morgan show, predicted this. He said what they're going to do, they're going to set up aid shops. There's not going to be nearly enough aid, which means there's going to be a rush to get to aid. The IDF is going to claim there was a riot. The IDF is going to fire upon the crowd. That is exactly what happened.
Sure.
That is exactly what happened. He saw it coming. It wasn't difficult for him to see that coming. But that testimony is just devastating. It's devastating. And, everybody sees it now. Everybody sees it now. And so share that. It's only 9 minutes. The full speech is only 9 minutes. So share that testimony far and wide, and hopefully someday we can make it work, but we'll bring him on.
Yeah, I think even knowing everything that we've known, just the level of just demonic disregard for human life, just the absolute lack of compassion and just normal human empathy is just beyond anything I think even people with very low expectations expected. You read about the Nazi invasions and war crimes. A lot of the Nazi soldiers killed themselves because
Yeah.
they couldn't handle, like, they would go and have to, like, mass execute a village. And
Right.
a lot of them would commit suicide because they just couldn't bear
A lot
what
of
they had
American
done.
veterans in Vietnam and Iraq, that's a huge problem, with a lot of Western warriors. Yeah.
Right. The Israelis are so hopped up on this belief that they are avenging the Holocaust and that in some way the people they're doing this to are the proxy
Right.
for the people who did that to them, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with it. I think they're a population that's particularly vulnerable to that because it's so woven into their religious mythology. The idea of people constantly coming to wipe you out and surviving against all odds. I mean, that's like core to the Jewish identity, that vision of themselves. And you have in modern times an actual documented genocidal attempt against them. It justifies anything, man. It justifies anything. Like, and that's why, the Nazis, you have a kind of secular religion in Nazism, but most of those guys were just soldiers.
Right.
They're just soldiers who happen to, be caught up in it, who didn't have that ideological fervor. The difference with the IDF is they're all products of a society that is predicated on beliefs with genocidal implications from the beginning. There is no real countervailing idea of what Israel is. Its basic premise is a colonizing supremacist premise based on a very particular interpretation of history mixed with a Bible that most of them ironically would claim not to believe in, being secular, but they believe that this land was given to them nonetheless. You put all that together, it's a lack of empathy that you don't even really see with all of the Nazis. Some of them, but not all of them. It's just you don't see almost any. There have been people who refuse to serve in the IDF. Like, there are some Israeli conscientious objectors. We showed with the Jerusalem Day coverage, you get some people who go out there to protect the Palestinians
Right.
from attacks by Israelis on Jerusalem Day. There are some, but it seems that the IDF just don't have anybody who have a problem with this, or almost none, to
Yeah.
go and do things like this. It's just amazing that you could get this many people with such a lack of just the basic human impulse to see children in that condition and not just say, I can't.
I can't do it. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is part of how you get a society where you see poll numbers like the poll out of Penn State that Max
Yeah.
Blumenthal tweeted
Right.
out, because,
Right.
and a lot of that is the compulsory enrollment in the IDF, because the thing is, when
Right.
you give someone a gun and armor and you put them in, what you construct as a survival situation, well, now have a very, very first person attitude towards this issue, right? Where they see Palestinians as the enemy, because why do they have this
Right.
weapon to defend
Right.
themselves if they're
Right.
not? So of course you come out of that and you probably adopt that way of thinking very quickly after enrolling, and certainly after you're done. And yeah, the very, very small minority of Israelis who are not on board with this are those purple vest people, are the
Yeah.
conscientious objectors. But every incentive and every sort of structural imperative of the society pulls people in the exact opposite direction of that, right? It enforces, yes, what I mean, Norm Finkelstein says it's a satanic state, and that's really the way they behave.
They seem to have stopped now, because I haven't gotten this on my Facebook in a while. How sick a society that you would flood Facebook with short videos of teenaged Israeli IDF women dancing provocatively as a way of getting people on your side. I mean, that clearly was a government effort. That was not a private effort. It was everywhere. I kept getting it. I would keep cursing them out, saying horrible things. That would just get me more of them. Now, somebody seems to have said, maybe portraying our daughters as genocidal whores is not the best way to win over the public. So I haven't seen that in a while. But what a deranged society to think that's a good idea.
Right. Right. Of course. Hey, thanks for watching our video. We're currently raising money to produce our documentary film on the Uhuru movement. Go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in.
Every dollar you give goes towards the project. We do not take any kind of salary on these. We mostly live on Gatorade when we're on the road, so even solid food is iffy, just enough to get by. But we do not take any pay for this. Every dollar actually goes into what we need to shoot the project. The Uhuru movement is a subject that really deserves more exposure. Everybody heard about it through the court case, and that was an important thing to elevate. But they've done incredible community work demonstrating a different way that is socialist and not dependent on the government at the same time, which a lot of people don't even realize that still exists in the tradition of the Black Panther food and education programs. And to show there is such a strong community like that with such strong leadership is really important, particularly at this historical moment.
Yeah, so we're really excited about doing the project, but we need your help. So go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in. Thanks very much for your support.
Please clap.